Welcome, everybody. It is 12th of December 2023, and I'm your hostess, Debbie Levitt from Delta CX. And this is my weekly live show where I take your questions and try to do some mentoring and coaching on whatever topics you feel you need some help with. Um, so welcome to Q&A AMA, and we normally have Dr. Nick Fine on the second Tuesday of every month, but unfortunately he had a conflict, so I think he'll be joining us next Tuesday. So press pause, you Dr. Nick fans. It's just me today. But as always, I want to thank all of our past, present, and future Patreon supporters. Patreon is kind of the center of my world right now. You can join it for free at patreon.com/cxcc. And I also have some paid tiers starting at $1 American a month, which most people can afford, though not everybody. And it's a great way to support the content and what I'm doing. And of course, most of it goes directly to me, which is more than I can say for YouTube and other places. So, that being said, we do have a question left over from last week. I want to apologize. Someone sent in a question. I didn't see it come in. We didn't get to it. That's my fault. I sometimes miss questions, but I want to make sure everybody knows that I save those questions and they will eventually be answered. So, and I've also turned off most of my effects because I'm traveling, hotel room, and so I've turned off the effects to just help my travel computer run this show a little bit easier. So you won't see explosions when people subscribe, but please subscribe. You won't see messages pop up on the screen, even though Ana Lucia just said hello, everyone. So I'll make sure I read everything out. So the leftover question we have, before I mention that, remember you can put in your questions in the live chat, which I'm monitoring, or you can send them in anonymously, or if you have a long question, at deltacx.com/links. And I'll be here for about an hour taking your questions, so send them on in. So, the leftover question from last week, which again, I apologize that I didn't get to, this question says, hold on my travel computer, it's small. I've heard you speak about your skepticism of UX maturity frameworks like the NNG 6-level model. Is assessing a company's UX discipline a useful activity? If so, how do you recommend doing it? If not, why not? Um, Sorry that I'm blipping a little bit. I am on hotel Wi Fi, and you know that's always a little hit and miss, but hopefully everybody can still hear me, even if the video blips a little bit. Okay, so yes, I had written an article about how I think we should stop using these maturity models because they do run the risk of pissing people off, alienating them. It's always an awkward conversation to come into some sort of company or group and say, "Hey, look, here's a maturity model and look how terrible you are. Here you are way at the bottom. Boy, are you getting this wrong." Now, obviously, we might not exactly say those things, but that can certainly be the impression we give. And that makes me worried that we might then, if we're trying to create change, we might be ineffective. Yeah, Ana Lucia says, the audio is fine, the image is a bit slow and skipping frames. That's fine. I will take choppy video as long as people can still hear me okay. So thank you. So, for example, in 2022, I had a 6-month contract where I went into a $1 billion European company to try to help them be more customer centric and try to help them elevate and improve. Sorry, I'm still a little sick. Their UX practice and things like that. I thought about showing them the UX maturity model, in this case, my UX maturity model, which is a variation on what NNG did, in that I brought in a second dimension. It's not enough to just look at, oh, does UX seem to have a department? Does it seem to have managers? You know, that's one way for something to mature, but mine looked at autonomy. Does UX get to decide their own work? Does UX get to decide their own timeframes? Or are they told, do this the way I say it and get it to me tomorrow? So I had a dimension for autonomy. And I thought about showing this to this company. And I think I either ended up deprioritizing that slide or removing it, because I think the question is kind of, let's be honest, who cares? If this company is bringing me in specifically to do this work, do I want to tell them, here's how bad you're doing? Here's where you're low on this maturity model. It's probably a little bit more helpful to just skip some of that and just say, look, here's some of the things you're shooting for, or here's some of the things you want to achieve. Sorry, I'm trying to remove gun references from my language, and it's hard having grown up American. Here's some of the things you're trying to achieve. You're trying to achieve a more independent UX department, a larger UX department, a more involved UX department, a UX department that is understood, isn't belittled, minimized, circumvented, excluded. I can say that to them, and I can help them work towards that without using a maturity model, especially since I think a lot of the maturity models are lacking. They tend to focus on one dimension, which tends to be who's doing the UX work and how many of them are there. And so I'm not for maturity models. But coming back to the original question, is assessing a company's UX discipline a useful activity? Yes and no. I think, who is doing this assessment, and is this an assessment that the company is open to hearing? Because if the company thinks they're great, doesn't want to change, doesn't really care about UX, congratulations on your assessment. Whether or not you used a framework or maturity model, this may be something nobody wants to hear and nobody cares about. So usually when people ask me, hey, should I be introducing maturity models or talking about this and that, I always say, do you have an open door to do this? Because sometimes you don't, and you can try anyway. I'm not saying never try, but it can be very hard to make any kind of change in an organization that doesn't want that change or doesn't even want to have that conversation. So, my question would be, you can assess your UX team or department all day long. You can use a maturity model or not. You can say, here's where we're going wrong and here's where we need to be better. Is anyone listening? Does anyone care? Will they allow these changes? Will they give you more budget? If not, can you fight for these things? Is there a chance? And so to answer that question, is assessing a company's UX discipline a useful activity? Probably only if they're going to allow change. And some companies will, some companies welcome it, and some companies push against it. They prefer a UX team to be smaller. They love to lay off their UX people. They don't understand why they're there. And so it's hard for someone to say, this is immature. You need to be more mature. So, how do I recommend doing this? If you're a leader, you should have the power, authority, autonomy to raise these issues, have these conversations. Hey, our UX team is disempowered, and here's how. Hey, morale on our UX team is low, and we lose good people, and here's why. But you have to have some sort of champion who's going to listen to that, someone who is interested or cares or wants to know how we can be better. And any door can be an open door. Maybe someone says, I hear Amazon is really customer obsessed. I think we should be like that. Well, I think Amazon is mostly obsessed with making us do things. I don't think it's a healthy customer obsession. Sorry again that I'm blipping. But again, any door is an open door. If you think that we've had some bad outcomes lately, we released products or experiments or updates that failed, great time to talk about UX and CX and what are we getting wrong and how could we be better. After all, Agile says we have to keep doing that. Agile says we continually self assess, we have a retro, we look at what went wrong or what we could do better, and then we're supposed to act on that and do better and be better. But so often we don't. And so you can certainly try. And you can certainly lean on existing paradigms like the Agile Retro and like the idea of Agile being about always trying to assess our internal teams and processes and make them better. Lean says continue assessing your internal processes and your outcomes and your costs and your failures so that you can be better. So there are things that we can lean on, so it's not just us going, "Hey, this is bad. Hey, this is wrong." Can people hear me okay? It looks like I'm blipping a lot, which always stinks because hotel Wi-Fi is very out of my control. Very out of my control. Um, so please let me know, even if you don't see me very well, I hope you can still hear me okay. Now, yeah, so I think that covers a lot of this question. I've spent almost 10 minutes on it. I hope that helps the person who asked. But that's it for questions. And so I am live. If you would like to ask a question of any type, anything you think I might know anything about, it could be in CX, UX, product and service strategy, and other stuff. Please ask it. The blipping is actually in my system. I think I took off the way for you to see my screen because I tried to strip down my system. Um, John says, all too often people shy away from improvement ceremonies as it has the connotations of accountability. An experimental culture is needed. John, I can certainly agree with you, but even more than that, I would have to say that accountability is needed. You can be experimental, but if your experiments often fail, especially as we've seen some statistics come out recently, like 92% of Airbnb's A/B tests fail, and those were tests they were highly confident would succeed. That's a mess. That is not a sign of mature anything. That is not good product strategy or good product management. That is definitely a cry for help. So I think that just being experimental doesn't necessarily mean that you've improved your processes. Yeah, John says agreed. Thank you, John. In fact, I'll put your comment up on the screen so that we can refer to it. Here we go. Um, so I think that we have to go beyond being experimental because I think it's some of the experimental nature that got us into this no accountability universe because we kept using these excuses like, well, it's okay if experiments fail. We want to learn. But when I look at companies and I go, what? You're failing 50, 70, 80, 90% of the time fairly consistently? Doesn't sound like you're learning. If you were learning, you would be failing less often over time. No company is going to fail 0% of the time or never make a mistake. So, okay, we get it. Sometimes we're going to get something wrong, and that's okay. And we welcome that, and we hope we're going to learn from that. But are we really learning? So, I think that we really have to take a closer look at what experimentation means, but more so what accountability means, because I do want to see people held accountable for failures and especially ongoing failures and failures because of bad decisions. John says spin on results is an enemy of strong product management. Absolutely agree. I have seen that spin many times where we try to make it look like some sort of change in our numbers. Excuse me. I don't have the flu anymore, but I still have this lingering cough. Don't get sick, everybody. So yes, spinning results is an enemy of everybody because spin is essentially dishonesty. And I think honesty is important. Honesty might even be our company value. So we should not welcome or celebrate dishonesty in internal metrics or internal reporting. Just doesn't make sense. Not a sign of strong anything, not a sign of strong product management or strategy or user experiences or anything like that. So I think this would come back to accountability. If we had accountability, then when people do, let's just say, funky things with numbers and results and survey scores and other stuff, someone would say, wait a minute, that's not right. That's not what that means. Or it's not okay for us to continually fail, or it's not okay for us to have a stagnant NPS or a decreasing NPS. Excuse me. There has to be the people saying, wait a minute, this isn't okay. And accountability doesn't mean you get immediately fired. I don't want to see people fired unless they really need to be fired. But in general, I don't think accountability means you're automatically fired. Accountability means you're held responsible, and it could mean maybe you don't get as much budget next time because of what you wasted last time. Maybe you get a partner on the project and more people are overseeing this with whoever is this team leader. Maybe you're put on a performance improvement plan, which I don't love, but it could happen. I've seen people get demoted. Again, don't love that, but if it's deserved, maybe it happens. So I think there are a lot of ways to be responsible and be accountable. For example, a good way to be responsible or accountable is, let's say you had a small or large failure that we know from numbers and outcomes and other things. How did your next project go? Was it another failure? Are you someone who just keeps failing? I don't care if you have excuses for it. I don't care if you want to say, but we're learning. What are we really learning if we keep making bad decisions? Are you guessing? Are you working from opinions? Are you trying to go faster than we should? Some of this is speed over quality. So, oh, I see we have an anonymous question. Thank you. So, thank you, John, for that comment. It's led to a really nice discussion. Let's take a look at this anonymous question we're just getting in. I'll put it up on the screen. And let's see. Paste. Okay, we need to make it a little smaller. Okay, this says, is it possible to do usability testing analysis without rewatching the session recordings? I've been criticized because I always rewatch the sessions to do the analysis, especially that I'm the only facilitator and I have no observers with me. I feel that I can't write notes and focus with the participant at the same time during the session, but I don't want to waste time rewatching the sessions. Do you have any tips? Yes, I do have some tips. So, first of all, let's focus in on other people being in the session with you. I'm not saying they should be asking questions or unmuting themselves or showing up on camera. No, they shouldn't. You're the moderator, you're the facilitator. These other people should be behind the scenes. But having observers can be helpful. Those people can see things that maybe you do miss. Those people can take notes that you don't feel you've got the time to take. So, thing one, I do not want you to take heavy notes during a session. You're absolutely right. A good moderator must stay in the moment with the participant, especially if there's something you're observing, like a task or usability testing. So, I'm not going to advise you to take more notes or better notes. So, one tip is to get a note taker in the session with you. And it just has to be someone who you've given some hints about how to take good notes. Maybe it's a designer. Maybe it's a product manager. Maybe it's an engineer. I technically don't care who it is, as long as it's a smart, observant person who can take some good notes. Those notes can be helpful. Number two, do you take a mountain of notes after the session is over when it's very fresh in your mind? Some people don't do that. Some people say, well, that was a good session and I know I'm going to watch it later, so I'm not going to write down anything or too much now. I think that's a mistake. I think especially if you're not taking notes, then you definitely want to do a brain dump as soon as the session ends, everything that you remember about it. What's another thing that you can do during the session that might help you out that isn't taking notes? Write down some timestamps. If someone says something really great that you want to make sure you don't forget or miss, or something that would make a great quote or a video clip, just write down on a piece of paper what time it is. Because you know what time you started the session. I started the session at 9:30 in the morning. Ooh, that person said that at 9:48. Okay, when you go back to your recording, go 18 minutes in and find the great thing. You've now increased your efficiency and helped yourself not take too many notes, but you just write down some timestamps and then you know to go back later and just find those moments. Because what we found at my company, Delta CX, is that very often It can take 3 to 5 hours to rewatch 1 hour of a recorded session, depending upon how much observation there is. That means if you have, let's say, 10 hours of recorded stuff or 5 hours of recorded stuff, you've got to multiply that by 3 or by 5 to get through it. That means you're ultimately spending most of a week to rewatch these things and take your notes. And I can see it, and first of all, that is the right thing to do. That is the better way to go. But sometimes we don't have the luxury of that time. We're under pressure to get people our findings and insights and actionable suggestions. And so we need to find a way to speed this up. So I will tell you that there are many studies that I do where I do not rewatch my videos. I go by my notes. I go by some of my timestamps. I try to bring in a note taker where I can so that we can go by their notes. Maybe you have 2 note takers. Why not? This is a great opportunity for, what was it called? Is it called research immersion hours? I forgot what it's called, but there's a name for it. And you can even have it as an OKR where you can say, look, seeing our current customers or target audiences talk about things, do things. This is really important for the whole cross-functional team. So you know what? I want to make sure that each person on the team sits in on 2 of my sessions. Pick 2. They're only a half hour each, or they're only an hour each. Come to 2 of them. You can't unmute. You can't say anything. You can send me notes behind the scenes if you think there's something you want me to ask. But take notes. Take lots of notes. We're going to rely on those notes later, and give them some tips on how to take good notes and what to look for. Ana Lucia wrote, I don't get what's the problem with rewatching the stuff. It seems a good practice. Who is criticizing this? It's usually just about time. Very rarely do people think it's a bad practice. It's more about the amount of time it takes. And again, that's really just a factor of usually you don't just watch a half-hour video and go, yep, that was good. Here's a couple of notes. Half-hour video watched in a half hour. I'm done. Usually it's a half-hour video that you keep stopping. You write some stuff down. You roll it back, you start it again. Ooh, they said this. Ooh, that answers this question. Okay, stop that, make some notes, roll it back, run it again. Oh, wow, I'm watching them do this task. This was really messed up. Take some, pause it, take some notes. So remember, a half-hour video rarely takes a half hour to rewatch. And that's where teams get nervous about the amount of time researchers take. So there are definitely strategies that we can use to try to improve some of our efficiency. Yes, it does mean cutting some corners on some of our best practices, like rewatching the videos. That's definitely a best practice. I'm not going to tell you, you can skip that. It's not important. Yes, it is important. But if you're under pressure to deliver insights and actionable suggestions, remember, don't just deliver findings, deliver insights and actionable suggestions and give a nice report with these key takeaways and what to do next. It's great that your team is hungry for that information. So you'll have to find some ways to speed that up and see if you can get some other people involved, not in doing your job, but in helping you take those notes. Ana Lucia says, what can we do if we can't get any extra observers? Yeah, again, write down some of those timestamps and check just those pieces of the video later, or write down as much as you can remember after the session happened. So those are some good ways to do it. In my opinion. When I take notes during a session, I just open up Notepad. I've seen some people have Excel spreadsheets and they want to type in the box that matches the question they just asked. And I say, you know what? That's for people with the luxury of time. Because I want to stay in the moment with the participant, if I'm going to make any notes or any timestamps at all, I'm just going to type it into Notepad and I'll deal with it later. I don't need my notes to have some sort of special layout or Excel matching thing. Another thing I'll sometimes do in quick note taking is write down a couple of words the person said word for word. If they said, man, this is really ugly, I'll write down in quotes, this is really ugly. And that means when I have the video recording later, and especially if I get an auto transcript of it, I can just search that transcript for "this is really ugly," and I'll find that moment in which it happened. So again, I think an efficiency technique here can be to only rewatch the key moments you've made a note are things you want to go back to later, and that maybe you don't have to watch everything over again, but maybe revisit some key moments. Again, not the best practice, but something that you can do when you are pressed for time and you still want to try to maintain the high quality of your work and your analysis. Thank you for a great question. Any other follow-up questions to that? Or let's see. Someone wrote, "I want to talk to you, but I can't message you. Your account is premium." What do you want to talk to me about? And is it a question that we can ask here? Because this is Q&A AMA. You can ask me anything. I think of this as worldwide live mentoring and coaching for whoever's seeing it. This video will be archived immediately on our YouTube channel, CXCC, which stands for Customer Experience Customer Centricity. So you can just go over to youtube.com/@CX-CC, and you can find this video nearly immediately in our Q&A playlist. Ana Lucia says that last strategy seems a good compromise, quite interesting. Yes, and again, develop your own. There's always something that we can do. And again, it is unfortunate when we do have to cut some of our best practices for time, but I understand that people are hungry to get those the report or the insights, and that tells me they value the research, and so it makes me want to try to speed up my process a little bit and deliver great insights and actionable specific suggestions as soon as I can. Another thing that I've done at my current job is, let's say we've done a whole bunch of sessions and I haven't written the report yet, but my team is on fire. I will go to them and I will say, "Look, I haven't finished the analysis and I haven't written the report yet, so more stuff will come. But you know what? After I saw these 5 people use our system, or I talked to these 12 people about this thing, let me just give you some 5 quick points that I heard over and over that are really important that we're going to want to take a look at. And yes, I'm going to give you a more complete report and more details on this, but let me give you an early readout with a couple of key things that I know I saw and heard over and over." And sometimes people love those early readouts because then they can start thinking, strategizing, wondering, making decisions. And so sometimes that kind of early readout helps as well before your formal report is ready. Hey, it's Chantel P. And let's copy paste this question. Okay, hello, question. Hello to you. Okay, hold on. One woman show. If you're following my Patreon, you know a little bit about the behind the scenes of my shows, and you know how hard it is sometimes to run a one-person show. So here we go. Chantel says, "What are your thoughts on UXers doing user testing, etc.? So not facilitating, but being a participant. I've done a few, but I find it interesting when people don't want UXers participating." So I need some follow-up information here. Are you saying that your company has to do some usability testing, and instead of finding current customers, target audiences, archetypes, you're going to have your UX team do usability testing and you're going to call that usability testing? Or do you mean when Debbie Levitt acts as a usability testing participant for some other company who just happened to recruit me for a study? Can you help me out, Chantel? Maybe it's neither of those. Help me know what you're talking about. Sorry, my internet is blipping again. Hello from Hotel Wi-Fi. I will be back at my desk next week. The second one. Okay, great. So you're talking about, and I've recently done this. Sorry, I kicked my camera. I've recently done this where I have filled out a screener survey, and the company picked me, and they wanted me to be a participant in their study because I am a current customer, and they wanted to interview me. I've done this a few times in the last few years, and I think that there's pros and cons to it. The pro is you're going to get some good feedback from a smart person who is going to notice more than the average person. The con is that we're probably a super user. We're probably not a low level, low knowledge user of the system. Sometimes we are, but sometimes because we work in UX, we are a super user of the system. We get the system. We can see some of the flawed designs and we figure out some workarounds for it. And so the downside is that sometimes we are a bit of a super user. But hopefully we're still going to talk to that company about like, hey, I have this workaround because you have this bad UX or bad design or bad or tech debt or whatever it is. So I'm not against a UXer being part of a study. We just have to remember that they might not be the middle of the bell curve. They might not be the average user. And so if we do have some different target audiences, sometimes we want to put that person into a bucket of a savvier user or a power user or something like that. I also think that a UXer is human. There are times where they say ridiculous things in interviews and usability tests. They're human. And so just because a UXer says something, I wouldn't give it more weight or less weight than a regular everyday person saying something. So again, I think if UXers are among your target audience and you are recruiting for a study and these people happen to fall into your bucket and you select them, that's fine. But if they don't fall into your bucket, they're not the users you're looking for, they're too savvy, in your opinion, um, etc., then you don't pick them. But I've been selected for a few studies in the last couple of years, and I hope I gave people some interesting information. I had a conversation with someone recently who said, "Wow, I'd love to use you." If you don't mind, in future studies, because you have a really unique perspective on this, because you fit into our target audience that's like this. And I was like, cool. So and that person didn't totally care that I was a UXer. It was more that I fit into this weird target audience that they have trouble finding. Um, okay, so the person who's writing in LinkedIn is trying to tell me they want to work for me. No, I'm not hiring, and so please don't apply for a job that doesn't exist. Please don't send me a private message. Please don't send me a job application. I'm not hiring. Thank you. Okay, we have another question coming in anonymously. This is one we've talked about before. Thank you for this one. Chantel, I hope that answered your question. Let me know. Let's see, you said, good point. I've done a few. But most are when they specify a UX person. I noticed I get kicked out for certain screeners when they weed out UXers. And again, that's their choice. If they want to weed us out for any particular reason, that's fine. If I'm not the target audience you want to talk to, I don't take that personally. That's totally fine. The person who said they might want to include me in future studies was actually from the U.S. Trademark Office because I register my own trademarks without using a lawyer. I write my own documents, I fight my own fights, and so I have to use the same system that lawyers use. But the Trademark Office knows that they have a target audience of people writing up their own trademark applications and putting them into the system. So that person was more interested in me as this target audience that they have trouble finding than the fact that I was a UXer. I think they won't care that I'm a UXer. It's like, whoa, you're from an audience we have trouble finding sometimes. Easy to find lawyers who submit their own trademarks, hard to find regular everyday people who submit their own trademarks, and especially who do it successfully. I have a number of registered trademarks. So, all right, so let's look at this next question, which came in anonymously. And it says, if a small business does not currently have a UX team or any UX roles, what would you advise that they start with? And I get this question a lot. And so my answer is usually one senior level designer, extremely senior, possibly lead level, someone with 5, 7, or more years of experience. The mistake that many companies make when they want to hire their first UX person is, well, let's just find the cheapest person we can because this UX thing is new to us, so we don't want to spend a lot of money on it. So just find someone who's just out of a boot camp or a school, or, some hungry person who's going to take a very low pay. But that's a mistake because you're asking someone with less experience, less knowledge, less ability, hypothetically, to do the work of a UX team of one. So typically, what I'm suggesting your first hire should be is a very experienced designer. Don't you need a researcher? Yes, but I think a company's second hire should be a very experienced researcher. Again, senior, lead, 5, 7, or more years of experience specifically in that. Um, so I would say first hire, extremely experienced designer who knows how to do a project alone, who knows how to work with teams, who knows how to figure out what problems we can solve. Sometimes that designer is okay or great at usability testing. Yes, that often should be done by a qualified researcher, but when it is your first hire, I think if you can find a designer who really knows UX, who isn't just a visual designer, but a great UX designer, a problem solver personality, a critical thinker who can usability test their own stuff, is probably a great start because that person can start to show the value of having a specialized, qualified designer just doing design and a little bit of testing. Don't give them front end development. Don't give them deep research projects. Let them be a great designer and let your company start to see the value of having a great designer and working on design with what someone with 5 or 7 years of experience should be a real expert. Bring in an expert. After you have an expert, you can think about bringing in some newbies because the expert will be able to allocate some time to supporting them and helping them. But I wouldn't be hiring newbies. Unfortunately, it's many newbies' first job where they come into a small company or a startup. They're the only UX person, and in general, they're not utilized correctly. They're mostly asked to make things pretty. They don't get to solve problems. They don't get to do any testing and make things better. They're just told, make things pretty and do what we say. To me, that's not a UX job. That's a web design job or a UI job. And then it's hard because those people expect to go into this company and get some sort of support and mentoring and help to level up because they're new. And in many ways, they might be guessing at what they're doing. So be careful about being a company's first hire when you are a newbie. I find that a lot of people are asked to be strategic when they don't even know what that looks like. They're asked to plan a project. They have no idea how to plan a project. So again, best for a small company to bring in an expert level designer, preferably 7 or more years of experience, pay them well, and listen to them. Mike said an interesting point would be a UXer would nitpick in ways a standard user would not, since they're typically more technology inclined. Yeah, exactly, Mike. This is talking about the previous question. That's why I said sometimes, not always, but sometimes a UXer might fall into our bucket or typology or persona of a more savvy user who really gets the ins and outs of our system and is an above average user in some way. So you just have to make sure you've noticed that. They're usually not the middle of the bell curve. Ana Lucia says, I also get kicked out of many screeners due to my background as a QA. It's funny because I've experienced dev friends and they love to ask me things because you're always so thorough. Yeah, of course, it is what it is. So, yeah, that is my answer, to this question. About who I would recommend companies start with. Hire number one is a deeply expert UX designer with great strategic and critical thinking and problem solving skills. Hire number two is a researcher with great critical thinking, problem finding, and problem solving skills. And from there, you can build out a team of people at different levels because you now have experts who can oversee those lower level people, check their work, guide them, mentor them, etc. Thank you for the question. So we've got 20 minutes left, but we do not have another question. So if you'd like to ask a question, please do. If we don't get any other questions, we can end early for today. Again, we will be back next week, hopefully with Dr. Nick. He couldn't make it today, but I think he'll be able to make it next week. So and I'll be back at my desk, so this shouldn't be so darn blippy. Well, we'll give it a few minutes and see if anybody has a question. Sometimes it takes people time to type. And thank you to Evan who said not blipping, but I know I'm blipping a little bit because there's a thing I can see on my screen. If you're in our Patreon and you saw my recent post about how I run these shows, I think I mentioned how I know that it's blipping a little bit. I get a little blinking yellow thing in my interface, and it's like, uh-oh. That means not great signal. But I've stripped it down. I took, the on-screen comments and other things off to try to help my bandwidth and computer memory because I'm on my travel laptop, not my usual home computer, which could mine Bitcoin but doesn't. It's quite powerful. So if people don't have any more questions, that's totally cool. You do not have to have a question. Questions are optional. But again, I am here live every Tuesday. In the new year, we're going to change the times of these shows because you've asked me to, and my answer is yes. So some of these shows are going to be at 3 p.m. Italy time because I'm traveling now, but I'm normally based in Italy. And some of the shows will be at 11 p.m. Italy time. Now, I know some of these are too late for people in different time zones, but I'm hoping that by doing some shows at 3 p.m. Italy and some shows at 11 p.m. Italy, we'll cover the world. We'll get everybody included in one of those. And remember, these are also on YouTube immediately. So if you miss a show and you'd love to watch it back at normal speed, slow speed, or fast speed, it's on YouTube. These are often hard to find later on LinkedIn, but remember, they're all on YouTube on the CXCC channel in a playlist called Q&A AMA, like the title says. So I think I'll wind the show down. Thanks to everybody who joined and for the great questions in the chat as well as the anonymous questions. I hope I was able to give everybody some helpful advice, as that's always my goal. Let's see. I think that's it for shows for this week since I am traveling. Our next show will be... yes, next Tuesday, a week from today. Since I do a lot fewer shows during the holiday season, you're all so busy. Yes, Ana Lucia says, I'm glad I'm just 1 hour away from your time zone. Yeah, obviously it's harder for the people in North America, South America, India, Asia, Australia, to match up with some of my shows. My 3 p.m. Italy shows are like 6 a.m. for California. It's hard to get those people. So the 11 p.m. shows will be great for them. But then the 11 p.m. shows might not be great for India. So sorry to India. But then Australia is a whole other story. So they might prefer the 11 p.m. ones because it's morning in Australia the next day. So I'm doing what I can to start mixing these up a little bit more and get more people involved. So with that, I'm going to press the button that winds down the show, and I will see everybody in a week. Get your questions ready. You can always send them during the week to deltacx.com/links, and I put them on a list, and yours will be among the first that I answer in the next show. Thanks again, everybody. Be well. Bye.